North Korea claiming it's on standby to launch an attack and capable of fighting any war with the U.S. But tell that to certain left-wing Democrats who appear to take their side.
Kim Jong-un, the world always thought he was not a responsible leader. Well, he's acted more responsible than this guy is. The time for cranking up the anti-war machine is right now. So if you don't want to get caught deer in the headlights, start calling for diplomacy in North Korea immediately.
Here to weigh in, Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace. Chris, good to have you on this morning.
Good to be on.
There is a lot to unpack. We'll start with that. I mean, you've heard from a few of the Democrats. That's just one example of really going to the extreme here against President Trump's comments, saying that, the leader of North Korea in some ways is sounding more rational than our own president. What do you make of that?
Well, look, he is not sounding irrational. He certainly is talking very tough. There are some people around the world who are concerned with that, including Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, and the Chinese President Xi. On the other hand, we do have to point out that we've tried almost everything else to deal with North Korea. We've tried diplomacy. We've tried direct talks. Bill Clinton sent his Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, there. We've tried sanctions. None of it has worked. North Korea closer to having a nuclear ICBM than ever that could hit the U.S. mainland. So we'll see whether what President Trump is doing will work.
Chris, you raise a good point. Rasmussen saw President Trump's approval rating jump by 6 points this week to 45%. Yet the foreign policy intelligentsia on both the left and the right critical of certain statements that he's made. Is President Trump in touch more with the American people that feel like we've appeased and apologized for too long, and it's about time that we try a different approach, as you talked about?
Well, I don't know that I can say that we've appeased or apologized to Kim Jong-un and the North Korean regime. We certainly have tried softer methods, and they haven't worked. And now you see a president who is standing up to Kim Jong-un, the head of North Korea. In the end, it doesn't matter about polls. It doesn't matter about what anybody says. What matters is it going to work?
Yeah.
Right.
Is this going to get the North Koreans to stand down or not? And obviously, there is some nervousness about the fact that we at least are talking more about a confrontation. I would point out, though, as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, I often think it's more interesting to watch what we do rather than what we say. The fact is we have not sent military units closer to the Korean Peninsula. We're not evacuating Americans. There are over 100,000 of them, troops, dependents, just regular Americans in South Korea. We haven't started evacuating them. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Joseph Dunford, is on the Korean Peninsula in South Korea, visiting our allies there right now. So there's an awful lot of talk of war, but frankly, right now, it doesn't look like we're headed to war right away.
Well, there's a bit of a war playing right now inside Congress and between the president, it seems. You have Senator Lindsey Graham on the show this morning, Mike Pompeo as well. Senator Lindsey Graham has been critical of his own party for not getting anything done on repeal and replace of Obamacare. What will you talk to him about?
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll also obviously talk about the terrible events in Charlottesville, and we'll talk about North Korea. He's one of the leading voices when it comes to national security issues. Mike Pompeo, his first interview as director of the CIA, want to talk to him about exactly how close North Korea is to actually having a weapon that could strike the U.S. mainland. Talk to all of them at the top of the hour.
Yeah, it's a question everyone wants the answer to. We look forward to that, Chris. Good to see you this morning.
We'll be watching.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, well, critics were quick to blame President Trump for inciting the violence in Charlottesville just moments after he strongly condemned the deadly protests. David Webb says this is exactly the fight the left wanted. He's up next, and he joins us live.
And forget cutting in line. Now kids in one school district can pay to beat the lunch crowds. Just give an extra $100 and you'll move right to the front of the line.
Welcome back. About 25 minutes past the hour. Back with some quick headlines. An MS-13 gang member and one of the FBI's most wanted is now behind bars. This man, Walter Gomez, an illegal immigrant from Honduras, was arrested in Virginia after a 4-year manhunt. He now faces several charges, including the brutal killing of a former gang member back in 2011. And the Iranian parliament reportedly chanting death to America after voting to spend $800 million on its ballistic missile program. But Iran claims it is not breaking the terms of former President Obama's controversial Iran nuclear deal. Okay. And security is ramping up around Trump Tower as the president prepares to return to the Big Apple for the first time since his inauguration. The NYPD is planning for protests during the visit when the president is expected to hold meetings there. And I'm sure the traffic will be fabulous as always, Clayton.
That's right. All right, thanks, Abby. Well, in a strong message to America, President Trump condemned the violence in Charlottesville, saying hate and division must stop.
Well, thank you very much.
Are critics listening?
This was we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. We must love each other, respect each other, and cherish our history and our future together.
Mr. President, how can you respond to white nationalists who say they're participating in Charlottesville because they support you?
Well, here to react, Fox News contributor and radio talk show host David Webb. David, good to see you this morning. A lot to unpack here. He's being criticized for, among other things, these were the things that criticized President Obama about, right, calling, why won't we call it Islamic terrorism when there was a terrorism incident that was Islamic extremism? Why wouldn't President Obama call it that? He's being criticized for not calling it domestic terrorism, calling it for what it is. What do you make of this criticism?
Well, the criticism actually is easy to explain if you just listen to the clip that was played. The president says condemning it in has many faces, many names. What's the next question from a journalist? White nationalism. They go right for the jugular as they see it on tying it to something alt-right, white nationalism. The president had as much information as we all had that a murderer drove a car, and we know that he is a murderer, James Alex Fields, into a crowd of protesters. But look who was there. The president, no matter what he does, will have this alignment of white nationalists, David Duke condemning him, or the Antifa leftist hate movement, this loosely associated group of people that hate Trump, and even some Republicans who find a way to take political advantage. The anti-Trump, anti-American have come together, and they want to sow this discord. They want to tear the nation apart by having these fights. You know, Clayton, had we let this march play out, and in America, political speech and hate speech is protected speech, Skokie, Illinois, now Charlottesville, Virginia, they would have marched on. We should fight. We should reject hate. But it wouldn't be this major story. But here we have a major story that has grown. The death of a young woman, or a 32-year-old woman, 19 others injured. And we have a big story that is not being told in its context. And the problem is that no matter what Trump does, if he cures cancer, there will be those on the left or the anti-Trump movement who say he created it to cure it. It is ridiculous, and we as Americans should, frankly, listen to what the president said. He made a very clear statement,
but David,
and we should not listen to the narrative.
But, David, it's not just the left. As you heard yesterday, it's the right, too. You had Senators Marco Rubio, Orrin Hatch, and others saying, look, we need to call this what it is, neo-Nazism. We need to fight these white supremacists in this country. We need to call it what it is, and this bigotry and hate need to go. Does the president, to make even his own Republican Party happy, need to come out more forcefully, more vociferously, and denounce this type of white racism and this white extremism that we saw yesterday? Will that make them happy?
You know what? I don't think anybody who's anti-Trump would be made happy by anything. Back to my aforementioned, if he cured cancer, they'd say he created it to cure it. The fact is that President Trump has been forceful in his statements in the past. He was yesterday. He will be in the future. And those that either don't know the man, don't know people who ever worked for him, or don't know his real history, they will find a way to attack him. No matter what words he used, they will parse it. It's time to stop parsing the words and start to separate the actual discussion that needs to be had, put it in its relevant parts, and attack it. David Duke, the leftists, the Antifa, the Black Lives Matter, the anti-Trumpers, they're all loosely aligned in this attack on Trump. Why don't we deal with the issues as Americans? We hate fascists. We don't like Nazis. We don't like anyone who puts anyone in a category based on the color of their skin. We know that as Americans, but look at who's pushing the narrative and trying to drive us into these small camps of hate. It doesn't work. And look, we've turned the course on racism, sexism, women's rights. Look at what this country's done. How can anyone honestly come out and say that this isn't a great country and that a president who wants to support America for what she stands for is not a good idea?
Some good points and a much It's a very hard discussion to have this morning, David, and one we need to have in this country, I think, for all of us to come together. We appreciate you joining us as always, David. Thanks.
Good to see you, Clayton.
Coming up here on the show, will Elizabeth Warren ever support President Trump's big, beautiful wall?
By the way, Mr. President, we're never, ever going to build your stupid wall.
Well, guess not. Is that the winning message Democrats need? And they're the conservative duo taking social media by storm, but YouTube is cracking down on them for supporting President Trump. Diamond and Silk are here live to respond to that next.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends. Turning now to some headlines that we are following closely this morning, starting with this one. The son of Venezuela's president is now threatening the U.S., vowing to take the White House with guns if President Trump takes military action in the country. Well, the socialist government has been dealing with deadly riots as it attempts to rewrite its constitution. And this, as Vice President Mike Pence is heading to Colombia later today. It's his first stop of a week-long trip to Latin America that will not include Venezuela. And there's this. Elizabeth Warren claims that she is not running for president, but she cannot stop slamming the president over some of his biggest campaign promises. Listen.
Mr. President, we're never, ever going to build your stupid wall.
The Massachusetts senator also calling the president's travel ban a, quote, stain on America. And after a car was used to mow down violent protesters at a white nationalist riot in Charlottesville, Virginia yesterday, somehow, now it's the NRA's fault. Shannon Watts, the founder of Moms Demand Action, tweeted this: the radicalization of America has been encouraged by the NRA and open carry laws, which enable armed intimidation. Hashtag Charlottesville. Virginia has open carry laws, but guns were not even listed in the state's top 10 causes of death back in 2015. That's according to the CDC. We're always quick to point the finger, aren't we?
Nor were guns used, but anyway.
And what does a patriot do when high winds blow down an American flag? Well, of course, he puts it right back up. A homeowner surveillance camera in California catching this man's continuous attempts at getting it just right. Well, he finally decides to stick it in the ground to let it fly once again before the owner returns home. That's a patriot for you.
That's cool. You didn't know anybody would see that.
No, exactly.
Well, here to get some reaction on the news of the day, we're going to bring in social media sensations, Diamond and Silk. Thank you for joining Fox and Friends Weekend. It's great to have you both.
Morning, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
Well, of course, we need to get your thoughts on what happened yesterday in Charlottesville, how